Good afternoon and good morning, people coming from the West Coast and also from Hawaii. Welcome to the monthly Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, IAPD Peace Forum. The title of today's forum is Toward Reunification on the Korean Peninsula, an approach through people-to-people engagement. I am Tomiko Dagan, Senior Vice President of the Universal Peace Federation and the Program Director for the IAPD Peace Forum. Interreligious Association for Peace and Development is a project of the Universal Peace Federation, which is an NGO in general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the UN. The 70-year division of the Korean Peninsula has caused the unknown suffering of many people. As far back as the late 1970s, I was involved with a project supporting the repatriation of the Japanese wives and children who followed their parents and fathers and immigrated to North Korea. These families were deceived by the false propaganda and promises in the 1960s about life in North Korea, and then found themselves unable to revisit Japan, even if it were only to see the aging parents and relatives before they died. I read the government censored and then redacted many letters from these captive Japanese pleading for release. IAPD encourages various forms of people-to-people engagement as a soft power or track two approach to peace and to addressing issues of concern and challenges related to current living conditions and humanitarian needs in North Korea. Now, I'd like to invite the moderator of today's program, Dr. Michael Jenkins, the president of UPF International and the chairman of the UPF North America. Welcome, Dr. Jenkins. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Tomiko Duggan, who's the vice president of UPF for the United States. We are doing a series of programs every Tuesday on the reunification of Korea. And I might add the peaceful reunification of Korea. We are seeking to understand from various perspectives, how can we engage all the different nations, and particularly North Korea and South Korea, to be able to bring about a very wonderful and also a very positive development of friendships and relationships between North and South, between China, Russia, Japan, America, and South Korea. So we want to see how we can engage from a political perspective or from a religious perspective or from a business or media perspective. So the Universal Peace Federation has developed associations which are very, very significant. Associations of experts that are working together to bring about a better understanding of how we can collaborate together, not only with those nations directly involved with Northeast Asia, but also with those who are really, truly very, very interested on how they can come in from diplomatic relations with North Korea and help us to gain a very good relationship with the North, and also to open doors of dialogue and understanding. So that's our main concern right now, is how to bring about a non-governmental action of dialogue and understanding. We have experts in every field now that are collaborating together, because we do believe that peace between North and South Korea is totally possible. Today, we're working focused on the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development. And we're very, very interested to hear from our expert panel on these issues. So at this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Thomas Walsh to come first, as I would like to ask him, as the chairman of UPF International, to help us shape the understanding not only of the associations, but also how religious leaders, how people of faith and the NGOs can engage in a very tense situation where 71 years ago, war broke out. And yet that war has never been resolved. That strife and struggle has not been resolved yet. We want to add a positive energy that will help bring more dialogue and understanding. We're very confident that we're making great progress. I'd like to welcome at this time Dr. Thomas Walsh, the International Chairman of the Universal Peace Federation. Welcome, Dr. Walsh.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins, Mrs. Tomoko Duggan. It's a pleasure to be here and join this webinar of UPF and especially the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development. So I also look forward to hearing from Archbishop Stallings later in the program, and happy that Professor Thomas Wong is with us today. I'm going to do a screen share, and so if you'll just bear with me for a moment to make sure we let's see. Is that showing correctly?
Yes.
Anyone's?
Yeah, looks good.
Yes,
Very
Oh,
good.
okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and you can hear me okay?
yes, we can.
Okay. Anyway, thank you again, and I'll go through these pretty quickly. I guess I just want to give a little background that hopefully is helpful. I think our audience is already generally familiar with UPF, but I'll go quickly through this. UPF was established in 2005, but actually had a predecessor incarnation as the Interreligious and International Federation for World Peace that began in 1999. And UPF, in many respects, is the continuation of that effort, which also emerges out of prior incarnations that I don't have time to go through today. But under the leadership of Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, we've created a structure that has this family of associations, and there are really about 8 of them now. This slide, I think, may not have the most recent. You'll see the third logo there is IAPD. So these are all associations of the Universal Peace Federation. They're not separate organizations or that. So we work as an organic whole, although we have, with these association, kind of differentiated areas of responsibility, not as, again, separate organizations, but indeed one organization with multiple functions. And the IAPD started in 2017 at the initiative of Dr. Moon. We convened the inauguration in November of 2017, and on that occasion signed the resolution and had a major rally at the World Cup football stadium where Mother Moon spoke, and several religious leaders. You see them gathered here. Dr. Kyung Kim is speaking there, Bishop Don Mears. There was media coverage, and the focus was on peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. So this is kind of going back, I guess, nearly 4 years now, when IAPD, as one of the 8 associations, was established. IAPD was strongly represented during the World Summit in 2020, and the work of interreligious dialogue has always been a central component of the ministry of Father and Mother Moon. And the goal of achieving peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, likewise, a central objective and goal. Just a little bit to be reminded that Korea has a very strong religious history going back thousands of years, certainly with the emergence of Buddhism and proximity to China meant that Confucianism or forms of Neo-Confucianism, as well as very important indigenous religious traditions of Korea, including shamanism or persons with special spiritual gifts. Christianity in the 18th, 19th century came to Korea and took hold despite periods of persecution, has nevertheless taken hold. Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, was once referred to as the Jerusalem of the East, to give you an idea of how significant Christianity was in even what is now North Korea. And you see a picture down in the lower left of Western missionaries, some from Europe, some from America, who made a significant impact in Korea. Korea has a very strong Christian population in South Korea. I think as many as 40% of the population are Christian, and they're very devout and active. This Yoido Full Gospel Church is known to be one of the largest mega churches in the world, a Pentecostal church with several 100,000 members. You see there a picture of Billy Graham and his wife. Mrs. Graham taught for a period of time in what is now North Korea. Billy Graham has visited there, met with, as you see there, with Kim Il-sung. Of course, the Korean War changed things dramatically. The North became committed to an ideology called Juche ideology, but it had its kind of birth in affiliation or association with then the USSR and, of course, the People's Republic of China, and became a variation on the theme of Marxism, Leninism as a worldview. And as we'll hear more later, Father and Mother Moon 30 years ago, this year in November, visited and met with North Korea's leader, then Kim Il-sung. We have UPF, and I'll just mention here, and Dr. Jenkins has been very instrumental in these over the years, where many times delegations would come from the United States in particular. You'll recognize people in this photo from either the Washington Times or Congressman Burton, Dr. Mansurov, Congressman Doolittle, Ambassador Detrani, Chairman McDivitt, Bill Gertz, and others who've met with counterparts in Korea from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Assembly, intelligence briefings, special visits to the Panmunjom, et cetera. So these have been very significant, all aimed at increasing our stock of knowledge of the situation, of understanding at a deeper level the dynamics that are going on, and working to build relationships. There's Ambassador Woolsey, the former director of the CIA, on this particular. The recent Rally of Hope and the Rallies of Hope in general have an inter-religious component, but also have had a strong focus on peaceful reunification of Korea, particularly this most recent one on May the 9th, when we inaugurated what we call Think Tank 2022. So let me now turn a little bit to maybe some ideas of action steps. I hope it's helpful, even kind of contextualizing some of our own work. I thought even some terminology, not everybody's familiar with some of the jargon, but words like NGO means a non-governmental organization. It means an organization like UPF or Family Fed or Women's Fed. FBO is more specifically a faith-based organization, or you might call it a faith-based NGO, but the acronym FBO is faith-based organization. And sometimes we say that these organizations are engaged in soft power approaches to peace. And that's in contrast with what we would otherwise call hard power. So this is a kind of an academic distinction. Ordinarily states, meaning nation states or governments, they're state actors. They act as states, employ hard power. And these are means of really of coercion, and they are usually carried out through a threat of military deterrence or serious economic sanctions that, so to speak, twist the arm of a competitor or rival or threatening country. And every government has instruments of hard power. Even at the domestic level, there are instruments of hard power in a police force, for example, that can exercise hard power when needed. But there is also an area called soft power that we can say is the attempt to employ instruments of persuasion rather than coercion. Now, this originated with the acts of governments, that a government like the United States can be a military threat to a rival or a competitor or other threatening nation to maintain its national security, but it can also provide aid or humanitarian assistance that wins the hearts and minds of people. So can send even military personnel to areas where there's been an earthquake as an exercise of soft power that kind of persuades or builds friendly relations. But this concept of soft power can also be applied to non-governmental efforts which do not use instruments of coercion, do not have instruments of coercion, but only of persuasion. So one way of looking at the work of UPF, it's using soft power. Another term that you may have heard, I know many of you are very familiar with these terms, but some may not be, but there's something called track 2 diplomacy. Track 1 diplomacy is when the ambassador of the United States meets with the ambassador of Korea, and they discuss officially on behalf of their governments. Track 2 is sometimes called back channel diplomacy, or it's unofficial. It's not officially representing the government, yet in certain ways it can make impact indirectly. Another term is sometimes referred to as people-to-people diplomacy. One origin of this concept goes back to the Eisenhower administration after World War II, where he'd seen the horrors of war, of the Holocaust, and felt more people-to-people interaction can help prevent war. So is an instrument of peace. These are just some terms you may want to think about. Then there are all kinds of non-governmental organizations or faith-based organizations with different areas of focus. Some focus on human rights, some on social justice, some on humanitarian goals and objectives. In preparing for this talk, I read an article about evangelical faith-based NGOs who are active in North Korea. And they differentiated between humanitarian evangelicals who are working in North Korea and human rights evangelicals who are, let's say, concerned about the human rights situation in North Korea. Others who want to provide, who may also be concerned about human rights, but do not make that the priority of their work as an NGO or faith-based organization. So when we think of NGOs or even faith-based organizations, you have your left-leaning and your right-leaning. You're more liberal, you're more conservative. You may have some that are more radical almost. You have some that act very professionally and some that are not quite as professional. And you might have education-oriented NGOs. This PUST is the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, which was started by an NGO as a way of doing humanitarian, but often behind that humanitarian goal or action, there are multiple objectives in a way. So an evangelical that say invests in Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, an NGO, may want sincerely to educate the people of North Korea. They may also feel that in the long run, I want to help this society transition to a better type of society, perhaps also embrace Christian values. This is an article I read by an Andrew Ye. What are the types of engagements in North Korea? What are most of them working on? Some are humanitarian, most of them. Some provide development assistance, about 20%, business, educational, professional training. So it gives you an idea of the kinds of people-to-people, soft power, track to faith-based organization activity going on in North Korea. Some of the NGOs and particularly faith-based organizations in DPRK, one's called Love North Korea Ministries. And maybe some of you heard of this, but it was new to me. They also were instrumental in starting surfing tourism of North Korea as a surfing destination to try to build more people-to-people interaction. There's an organization called REA International, again, an evangelical, and they have a goal, Great Harvest 2027. Now, some of you have heard of other goals for 2027, but this is an example of an evangelical faith-based organization working in DPRK with something they call Great Harvest. They're thinking of the harvest. They're also thinking, we can't go there now because of the pandemic. And they describe themselves, we are like Moses. We see the promised land, but we can't enter right now. So we have to prepare ourselves nonetheless for going there. And some of these evangelicals, many of you know evangelicals that see Israel as very, very special in God's providence. Well, there are evangelicals that also see Korea in that way as a special chosen nation that God has great plans for. And they work toward that goal. Here again, I mentioned PUST, Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. There's something called Korea Peace Now and the Women Cross DMZ. These are women NGOs that are active in trying to cross the DMZ to build relationships. There's an organization, some of you know, we have colleagues that work with the DMZ Forum. So just some examples of other faith-based organizations. You might want to look at something if you Google engage DPRK mapping initiative. It actually will show a map of Korea, and then it will show in different areas where these different faith-based organizations, NGOs are working in North Korea. Engage DPRK mapping initiative. World Vision is a major evangelical faith-based organization that also has a presence in North Korea. The American Friends Service Committee, the Quaker NGO, just a few examples. If we look at the UN, faith-based organization, I think there's around 3,000, approximately 3,000 NGOs affiliated with ECOSOC at different levels. And about 10% are faith-based organizations, and about 60% are Christian. What areas do they work in at the UN? Disarmament, peace, environment, human rights, sexual and reproductive health rights issues. Some of them may be interested in prevention of abortion, others in enhancing reproductive rights globally. So again, you've got the left and the right active. When you say FBO, you can't assume one kind or another. You have to research it. Same way with NGOs. Suggest to read up on this if you're interested in this people-to-people approach. There's a journal called the Journal of Korean Religions. Just an article that I came across. I didn't have time to read it, but something about faith-based NGOs in North Korea. And there's a link there. But I think if you just Google around, you'll find this. Down here, there's a book called Religious NGOs at the United Nations. So my suggestion, learn about these other NGOs and FBOs. It's good to know about them. There are things we can learn from them. You can learn from them. Get acquainted, listen, and learn. Now, going forward, at the recent Rally of Hope on May 9th, UPF inaugurated Think Tank 2022 to be a virtual think tank of more than 1,000 experts from all over the world with interest in and expertise in the search for peace on the Korean Peninsula. So with this think tank, we plan to start a series of expert working groups that are linked to the 8 associations that I spoke to you about earlier, so that there would be parliamentarians in an expert working group, or former heads of state, religious leaders, media leaders, academicians, business leaders, first ladies and women leaders, artists, and leaders in culture. They all have a role to play. So again, particularly in this soft power area and this track to diplomacy. So we will start to develop these expert working groups right away. We're already planning a series of 5 international leadership conferences that will start in June and be carried out every 3 weeks until the middle of August. And these will all focus on peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. As soon as the pandemic is solved, we will reactivate the fact-finding delegations that will take groups of experts to South Korea, hopefully one day soon to North Korea, and work on this people-to-people track to soft power. Another term they sometimes use, these are confidence building measures or trust building, that where relationships have deteriorated and there is great mistrust, we have to find steps we can take, just like perhaps in a struggling marriage. You have to try to rebuild things and reestablish trust and confidence in one another. So in trying to promote reconciliation, sometimes you start with modest steps and build up. Then, just as I mentioned earlier, World Summit 2020 as a major point in the development of our worldwide work. We are also anticipating convening a summit toward the end of this year, ideally in November, to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Father Mother Moon's visit to Pyongyang and to their hometowns. If the pandemic is not out of the way by then, that may have to be moved over into 2022. But from UPF's point of view, this is our primary all-encompassing focus on how do we bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. And the rationale there is this is not just a narrowing of our focus, but a concept that in order to address the issue on the Korean Peninsula, we need the whole world's cooperation. So it is a global effort. And in addition, that if we can make a significant breakthrough on the Korean Peninsula, this will have global impact in a very, very positive way. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you again for organizing this webinar and all the webinars that you do. I attend whenever I can, and I always find them informative and inspiring. So thank you again, Dr. Jenkins and Mrs. Tomoko Duggan.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Excellent presentation and very comprehensive. And again, congratulations on the success of the launch of Think Tank 2022 with support from very renowned scholars, leaders, and heads of state throughout the whole world at the Rally of Hope. Congratulations, and we look forward to seeing that day when our efforts will also bring North and South Korea peacefully together. Thank you.
Well, we couldn't do it without you, Dr. Jenkins, and your great team of UPF USA. So thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership as our international chairman. Next, we're going to introduce Mr. Tong Young Kai. Dr. Kai is the president of the Confucian Academy of Hong Kong, as well as chairman of the International Confucian Association. He was born in 1934 in Guangdong Province, China, studied Confucian teaching since his childhood, and first in the mainland and then in Hong Kong, where he went when he was 13. He's a successful businessman, served many government and community roles, former vice president of the Sports Federation of the Olympic Committee of Hong Kong, and he has served on the selection committee for the chief executive of Hong Kong. In addition, Dr. Tong is the recipient of numerous awards. In 2006, amazingly, he was awarded by US President George W. Bush the President's Award for Education Excellence as an outstanding Confucian scholar. In 2009, he was awarded the World Peace Grand Prize by the Lincoln Memorial Foundation for Peace and recognitions to his contributions for freedom and peace. And in 2011, he received the Confucius Culture Prize from the Ministry of Culture of China. In 2014, the Silver Bauhinia Star from the Hong Kong SAR government. So at this time, Dr. Kai will, who has sent his address to us, his message will now be read. I'd like to ask our technical team to put Dr. Kai's face upon the screen, his picture, please, as we will read this wonderful, wonderful presentation. A Confucian Perspective on Korean Unification. This was a speech he gave earlier at the International Leadership Conference in April, but he also permitted us to use it again today. I'm pleased to join you once again for this virtual meeting of the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development. I would like to contribute a few insights from the Confucian perspective on the complex question of bringing peace and unification on the Korean Peninsula. I also want to thank the organizers of the Universal Peace Federation for their invitation and their most meaningful work. Let me first respond to the general concept that religious leaders have a role to play in resolving this issue and all the great issues of our time. Unlike politicians and diplomats, religious leaders are not beholden to partisan or national interests. Religious leaders who are committed to truth and righteousness can take the most impartial, fair, and high-minded view of any situation, and thus are excellent peacemakers. Confucianism in particular is rooted in the ideals of peace and harmony. Confucianism defines virtue, first of all, in terms of upright character, which means personal alignment with the principles of heaven and the universe. Secondly, virtue is found in the proper relationships starting in the family. Specifically, it is benevolence from father to son, filial piety from children to parents, respect between brothers and sisters, and love and fidelity between husband and wife. This then proceeds to love and loyalty to one's society and nation. Confucius famously said, quote, "To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. We must first set our hearts right." If we examine the situation between North and South Korea from a Confucian perspective, we see that this is a family conflict between brothers. Their contentious relationship reflects conflicts of interest not only between the two, but between their extended families, which includes powerful nations such as China, Russia, Japan, and the United States. These extended families, unfortunately, have a history of conflict and disparate worldviews. In such a situation, Confucianism advocates mediation, which naturally leads to a win-win solution. The fundamental attitude of the successful mediator must be one of fair-mindedness. Confucianism advocates benevolence as the correct attitude for a man of good character and also the standard of justice. In the doctrine of the mean, Confucius says, quote, "Benevolence is the characteristic element of humanity. It teaches us to put ourselves in the place of others and to act with kindness and fairness, in consideration for the concerns of others in all situations." On the national and international level, this means the pursuit of consensus and collective benefit. Benevolence implies mutual respect and mutual commitment to search for a win-win solution to any conflict. It is the antithesis of tyranny or dominance over others. North Korea has pursued nuclear weapons in the belief that its powerful neighbors wish to subdue it by force. History shows us that attempts to subjugate by force lead to resistance. Between nations, this often leads to wars. Confucianism advocates that people should not be convinced towards war, but should be convinced, not forced. People can only be convinced by virtuous arguments and actions. There are many arguments in favor of a unified Korea, including a stronger economy, a stable political situation, and the easing of regional tensions, all of which would benefit the region and the whole world. First step is to envision what a peaceful, unified Korea would look like. Then to outline the potential benefits to all parties concerned and to create a roadmap toward that goal. Who can take the lead in the situation, set the example of benevolence, and thus become a credible mediator between mistrustful parties? Ideally, it's an impartial body like the United Nations that would play this role, establishing a channel for diplomacy and negotiation between all the nations involved in this conflict. But has the United Nations earned the necessary trust by demonstrating its fairness and impartiality? Alternatively, perhaps a non-governmental body like the Universal Peace Federation could put together a team of trusted mediators who could work with the parties to find consensus. UPF has the valuable and unique asset of being widely respected and trusted, as it has a history of engaging with all peoples fairly and treating all parties equally. In accordance with the tenets of Confucianism, it represents the, quote, "man of integrity," end quote, who can conduct the negotiations in a fair and disinterested manner. In this context, there could be a role for religious leaders as part of this mediation team who, as I expressed above, make the best peacemakers. Again, religious leaders make the best peacemakers. Of course, there will be challenges in dealing with leaders who do not share the common sense of propriety, which suggests clear standards of human behavior. Truly benevolent rulers or governments who embody the spirit of kindness and fairness in all relationships could bring about universal balance and harmony. Yet the Analects of Confucius say that in actual practice of propriety, flexibility is most important. The Chinese concept of harmony is not uniformity, it is consensus amid differences. Therefore, the only precondition in commencing a peacemaking process would be to be a respectful, open-minded, mindedness guided by the desire for a fair and just outcome for all parties. If every participant strives for consensus while accepting differences, a harmonious solution can be found. In conclusion, I would like to stress once again the role of religious leaders can and must play in serving as a beacon of light to the people around us. Worldwide societies are facing a diminished sense of morality, a lack of ethical consensus, and chaotic human behavior. People need examples of righteous behavior, of commitment to truth and love and respect and concern for others. It is our role and responsibility as leaders who represent the spiritual traditions of humanity to maintain high ethical standards and to guide others, beginning with our families, to do so as well. In my case, I do my best to uphold the Confucian principles of benevolence, faithfulness, compassion, and harmony, which I feel are fundamental to building a harmonious world. Thank you for your attention. I wish all of you great success in your endeavors and good health, both physically and spiritually. Let's give our thanks for the wonderful, wonderful message from Dr. Tong Young Kai. Just a tremendous scholar. And I think that, Dr. Walsh, this document should go in the archives of the foundation of what the IAPD is all about. So thank you again. We're going to have—
Here, excellent speech.
Yes, yes. We're going to have Dr. Thomas Huang. And I want to mention to our audience, we would like you to put your questions in the chat because we will have a few minutes at the end to have some question and answer. At this time, it's an honor and a privilege for me to introduce to you Dr. Thomas Huang. Dr. Thomas Huang is the chairman of the Chinese People's Federation for World Peace. He and his wife, Kathy, have spent many years in Asia and truly have embraced not only all traditions and cultures there, but won great respect from all leaders from all the nations in the area. He and his wife, Kathy, have an internationally blessed marriage and have a beautiful family and have shown to be a great example of bringing peace and love through the teachings of Father and Mother Moon. At this time, I'd like you to welcome with me Professor Thomas Huang, Chairman of the Chinese People Federation for World Peace. Thomas, welcome.
Okay. Dr. Walsh, Jenkins, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to join this good meeting. Today, I'm delighted to be with you today to share my experience, the historic visit to North Korea with Reverend and Mrs. Moon. Well, this year is the 30th anniversary of that visit. It was an inspiration and aspirational event that impacted Korean society with ongoing implications for the present generations. It was my great fortune to join the 6-member delegation accompanying them and to observe the unfolding of this providential event. Many people wondered at the time, how and why did Reverend Moon visit North Korea? Reverend Moon was the internationally known leader of an anti-communist movement. He had developed a critical counter-proposal to Marxist-Leninist theory known as Victory over Communism, and launched anti-communist organizations and activities around the world. He supported anti-communist campaign in Korea in the 1960s, in Japan in the 1970s, and in the United States in the 1980s. He organized an alliance of South American leaders against communism, known as CAUSA, and openly raised funds to support fight against Nicaraguan communist regime in the 1980s. So the news of Reverend Moon's landing in Pyongyang on November 30, 1991 was a shock to the entire free world. More than 70 media outlets, including newspapers, TV, and radio, gathered in Beijing to wait for news of the visit. I myself flew twice back to Beijing from Pyongyang to deliver the exciting news with reporters. The plane had 180 seats, but carried only 2 passengers, myself and 1 agent. Reverend Moon has personal experience with the North Korean communist regime. He had been in prison twice in 1946 and 48. He narrowly escaped death before being liberated by UN troops during the Korean War. Mrs. Moon, who came from the strong Christian family of 3 generations, also had a harrowing experience fleeing to South just before the Korean War. North Korean agent had tried several times to kill Reverend Moon during his anti-communist crusade in South Korea, and even in the United States. However, after his meeting with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev in 1990, Reverend Moon expressed his hope to visit his homeland, North Korea. North Korea surprisingly responded by sending an invitation. Reverend Moon was happy and eager to make the trip. Arriving at the airport in Pyongyang, Reverend Moon was overjoyed to see his 2 sisters and his elder brother's wife, whom he had not seen in more than 40 years. It was a very emotional reunion. The next day, Reverend Moon was invited to address North Korean officials at the National People's Congress. In his speech to them, he expressed his happiness at meeting long-lost relatives, his gratitude to the North Korean government for the opportunity to visit his homeland. But he was also pointed out the shortcoming of Juche ideology, saying it was not enough to build the paradise they aspired to. He said they need God's principle. Reverend Moon was straight, honest, and bold. It was unimaginable to be so critical in North Korea. This was very surprising to everyone, including our delegation. On the 3rd day, we went to the famous Kumgang Mountain, accompanied by Mr. Kim Dal-hyun, the Vice Premier of North Korea. Mr. Kim had a good conversation with Reverend Moon about future projects and cooperation. The next day, we were taken by 2 helicopters to Reverend Moon's hometown, meeting with the Moon family relatives. About 50 people were gathered there. Throughout our trip, there was an underlying uneasiness and concern because we never knew what would happen next. Each day, we are only informed of our schedule at the very last moment. However, throughout his 8 days stay in North Korea, Reverend Moon was very calm, focused, and confident. He knew that God's time has come, that God has prepared this historical meeting with Kim Il-sung for him. It represented the messianic mission of reconciliation between enemies and the historical enmity between brothers. On the 7th day, finally, we were driven to the presidential palace in Wonsan for a meeting with President Kim Il-sung. Interestingly, the place was very near to the Hungnam, where Reverend Moon has been imprisoned for 3 years. The luncheon was cordial and pleasant. President Kim kindly explained each dish, one by one, what it was, where it came from, how it was prepared. Toward the end of the luncheon, Reverend Moon took President Kim's hand and raised it high and declared in a joyful voice, "President Kim, now we are brothers, right?" Kim Il-sung's face was all smiles. At that time, I felt a great sense of relief and liberation. It was truly historical reconciliation between enemies. It was like anti-God camp and the anti-communist hearing a peace pipe, something like that. This historical meeting opened a new chapter in modern Korean history and brought the Cold War era on Korean Peninsula to an end. Two leaders agreed to support peaceful dialogue between South and North Korea. They discussed holding exchanges between members of families separated by the war and a project for creating a tourist town at Mount Kumgangsan. When we arrived in Beijing after the visit, the world media was waiting for us. Many of their reports reflected high hopes and expectations for Korean reunification. Later, South Korean President Kim Dae-jung visited Pyongyang for the first official inter-Korean summit. Our Tong group opened the Pyeonghwa Motor Company to produce North Korea's first domestic-made cars. And President Roh Moo-hyun visited the factory when he went to North Korea, and the Hyundai Group developed the Mount Kumgang Resort for South Korean tourists. Now, Mrs. Moon is carrying on this legacy and continuing to advance the hope of reunification of Korea. She had proposed opening up the DMZ that separated the two Koreas and creating a peace park. She has also proposed setting up an Asian office of United Nations there. Mrs. Moon has devoted herself to the movement for world peace with the same heart and the same spirit. Tremendous efforts laid down. She's setting the example for all the Korean people and for the world community to take responsibility for creating a better world for our future generations. God bless Mrs. Moon, Mother of Peace. We pray for her success. Thank you for your attention. Now I'd like to share some photos from our visit to North Korea. Okay, can I see the photos we prepare for? Tomiko-san,
Yes, we
can I
are
see?
seeing the
Can I
first
see the
slide.
photos?
Yes.
Where can I see?
Kathy, please assist him.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, and then this is the amazing, surprising meeting and of the two enmities for a long time. And then, yeah, let's move on. Yes. Well, I have explained about these two people's meeting just now, and I want to add some more comments when I see the photos. Okay, good. As I said, Reverend Moon was known adamant anti-communist leader. This meeting, this photo shows that 1975 is a real rally to right after the Vietnam was collapsed, and Korean people gathered together under the leadership of Reverend Moon, has 1 million people rally like this, declare the fight against communism. The next, I just explained who Reverend Moon is at that time. This is the Japanese anti-communism activities under unification movement under Reverend Moon's leadership. Next. Yeah, this same photo in the Yoido rally in 1975. Reverend Moon spoke. Very, very strong, and he will organize international defense forces when North Korea try invasion again. This is such a dramatic gathering. However, 1991 December, Reverend Moon appeared in Beijing and received a warm welcome by the Chinese officials at the airport. Next, yeah, this is that Tiananmen Square in front of the People's Congress. With let's go back to the first the Beijing picture. No. Move back to the one more, please. Yes. I'm showing this photo because without Chinese government support and help, this homecoming tour trip would not be happen. So why then I want to say some words why Chinese government warmly welcome and support Reverend Moon's trip to North Korea, because Reverend Moon really loved his Chinese people, and you may know the Panda Project in Guangdong province, 1989, is a tremendous investment with the motor company, Panda Motor Company, even though the business didn't make a successful end. However, Reverend Moon's loving heart toward China was expressed, and Chinese government and people were very impressed. And then the high officials received Reverend Moon at the VIP at the airport to support his trip to North Korea. Next, please. Yes, next. Well, this is the airport, Pyongyang airport. And this is the elder brother's wife. And here, this is the elder sister, Reverend Moon's eldest sister in the middle, and their grandson, and families. It is such an amazing emotional meeting, family reunion. Oh, this again, this is a Panda Motor Company in Guangdong, China. Okay. Next. This is the luncheon I mentioned about. At the end of this luncheon meeting, Reverend Moon raised President Kim's hand high, and he spoke in local language. President Kim, now we have become now brothers, right? And then in Korean is there was a really dramatic, amazing scene. I don't have the photo, but I saw that such a historical scene. I never forget this. Why I shared with you with my such a strong sentiment of relief. I still remember the moment. I felt myself, I am so relieved and liberated from the sentiment of enmity toward my enemy. Well, this was done. This remind me the biblical episode of the dramatic meeting and reconciliation between the two brothers, the Jacob and Esau. This exactly is a modern things. All right. Yeah, this is after luncheon. They're walking out the hall. But Reverend Moon hold President Kim's hands very tight. It was so wonderful. And this is his hometown in front of the Reverend Moon's father and mother's headstone and at the grave place. Well, yeah, this is our photo, our delegation together in front of the Kumgangsan for the.
Beautiful.
And then I had one more chance to visit North Korea with Tomiko-san, and then to develop the Kumgang Mountain project. Next, but later on, the Hyundai Group developed. This is the gentleman next to Peter Kim, next to Mother Moon, is the Vice Premier Kim Dal-hyun. He, for 2 days tour, he accompanied Reverend and Mrs. Moon and explained the situation in North Korea, and they have good talk with Reverend and Mrs. Moon. Next, this is Kumgang-san. And we had a plan to develop this place, but later on, Hyundai Group actually have done it of this for us. Next,
Tomiko.
I have this photo because of Tomiko-san is there. This is 1 year after the Reverend and Mrs. Moon's visit. The Reverend Moon sent a professional delegate to develop this Kumgang Mountain, which is a very beautiful area for. This is the Peace Motor Company by Tong Group, and the Nomuhyun, President Nomuhyun, and the Hyundai President, Mr. Tong, Hyundai Motor Company, Mr. Tong is there too, in the middle. And this is our Peace Motor Company. Now, this is 2004. Next. And they made this, the Hiparam, this car motor. Well, this is our efforts. And then Now still we have this peace center in Pyongyang to promote our effort to see the final unification. Well, 38
Yeah.
parallel.
UPF and the Washington Times.
Next one. Panmunjom. Next.
What about the third?
I show this photo. My conclusion is
My
this.
paper?
Very good.
Reverend and Mrs. Moon. Now, Mrs. Moon want to change the DMZ to Peace Park, and then develop beautiful park like this. She's doing tremendous efforts still, and then we all want to support Reverend and Mrs. Moon's divine effort. Make like this beautiful peace park at the DMZ all over the 155 miles. That's it. Thank you for giving me this kind of a wonderful opportunity. God bless.
Thank you,
UPF.
Professor Huang, we are so grateful for this presentation. It's one of the most wonderful presentations we've had on this series on how we can bring peace in the Korean Peninsula. We're so grateful to you and your wife, Kathy. Everyone in the audience should know that Thomas is here from Asia right now, and he had to begin at 3 a.m. So, but you look fresh and strong, and what a historic journey you were on. Kathy, you definitely still look like you just graduated from college. So thank you so much. Thanks to
Thank you for your wonderful, kind invitation.
it was wonderful. And Tomika, we're so happy to see you in North Korea. And you always played a key role. Larry Moffat was there.
We are a team.
And it's my honor to present our final speaker today, the chairman of IAPD for North America, Archbishop George Augustus Stallings. He is a true man of love and faith. I believe he will also be among that first delegation of religious leaders that will go from the DMZ and through the DMZ peacefully to Pyongyang. He was educated in Rome at the highest scholarship, and really has been a tremendous support for Father and Mother Moon. I'd like to introduce at this time founder of Imani Temple, Archbishop George Augustus Stallings Jr., IAPD chairman for North America.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins, and to all of our distinguished presenters, and especially to my central figure, who is the chairman of the Universal Peace Federation International, Dr. Thomas Walsh, to Dr. Dr. Kai, who is my brother in the Confucianist faith expression, to Professor Wong. You had me in tears looking at those photos. I've seen a few of those photos, but never all in a composite as you presented them. My heart was just touched, and I just felt the presence of our beloved true parent, Father Moon, right here with us. And I'm just excited to be a part of this interreligious association for peace and development as we focus on peace in the reunification, developing peace, establishing peace, as we work for the reunification of North and South Korea, what we call the Korean Peninsula. And I was so moved by not only my central figure, but my mentor, Dr. Walsh, when he talked about the role of soft power diplomacy, also known as track 2 diplomacy, which is very persuasive, not coercive, that this unofficial approach to bringing about a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, because that was part of my presentation, and he made a brilliant presentation on helping us to understand the difference between track 1 and track 2 diplomacy, hard power diplomacy and soft power diplomacy. And I am involved in the latter part. I, as a Christian, a minister who has been involved in this work of the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula for over 2 decades, as a member of the American Clergy Leadership Conference, and later on now the World Christian Leadership Conference, two organizations that the Mother of Peace, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, established, and here lately as the USA chairman of the IAPD, that we as faith leaders representing all of the religious traditions of the world are about soft power diplomacy, or track to diplomacy. Why? Because we believe as men and women of God that through the power of prayer, not only can things change, but prayer can change people so that people can change things. Our appeal as religious leaders representing all of the traditions, all the faith traditions of the world, is neither a direct appeal or plea to the heads of state or of North and South Korea, nor to its legislative or judicial branches. But our appeal is to the men and women of God who believe in the spiritual origins of all of humanity, that we are all bound together as brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of God, our heavenly parent, to form one universal family. And so we believe that through the power of prayer, through soft power diplomacy, we can I say, inflame the minds and the hearts of religious leaders to place the issue of the reunification, the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula on the front burner of our agenda. I'm reminded of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he wrote a letter to the white Christian ministers in the city of Birmingham in the state of Alabama during the heat of the civil rights movement, a letter that he wrote during the Easter season, April the 16th, 1963, when he spoke about justice and injustice. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And then that profound statement when he said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We're seeing that in the current crisis that is going on in the Middle East, that conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. While we as people of the world may not be directly involved in that situation, we are all indirectly affected as they, our brothers and sisters in Israel and Palestine, are affected by what is currently going on there. And so we have to realize that we are one global family under God, that we have a responsibility to strive for peace globally, because peace is a choice. And if peace is a choice, we must choose peace over conflict, hostility, enmity, and strife. That if we are going to truly build the kingdom of God, also known as the kingdom of heaven here on earth, we must first of all appeal to the religious leaders. As my Confucianist brother, Dr. Kai, said so eloquently and so profoundly in that statement that was read by Dr. Jenkins, that while we believe that politics plays a role, society plays a role, government plays a role, I think that as Dr., I can't get over how he just emphasized it, how Dr. Kai said that the religious leaders are the best in the world to bring about that peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And so I make an appeal to each and every one of us to strive, to preserve, to make every effort to preserve the unity that has the spirit as its origin and peace as its binding force, as is stated in the Bible in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, and that we can all one day see when there will be that peaceful reunification. Every time HCLC went to the 38th parallel on our constant pilgrimages to Korea over 40 times, our prayer at the 38th parallel is that we would live to see the day when brothers and sisters on both sides of that parallel line, that dividing line, would come back together to be one. The last thing I would like to say in regards to all of this is just sharing with you a few words from one of my favorite singers, one of my favorite groups, you wouldn't believe that, the Beatles and John Lennon. And John Lennon has a powerful song entitled Imagine. And when I think of the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, I think of this song. And just a couple of verses of the song, the lyrics from the song says, you know, imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Well, you may say that I'm a dreamer, but I've got news for you, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll come and join us, and the world will be as one. We pray for the reunification, the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And we ask that our God, our Heavenly Parent, will allow us to see the day when that divided peninsula will once again be one land. Kamsahamnida. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop Stallings. What an excellent presentation to conclude our program. I want to thank our founder, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, to all of our panelists, and especially to Dr. Walsh. We're honored to have the chairman of International UPF here today. Our next session will be next Tuesday. Every Tuesday, we're here at 2 p.m. Next week is the International Media Association for Peace, featuring Mr. Guy Taylor of the Washington Times International Security Reporter, and the renowned Mr. Bill Gertz, also with the Washington Times, who's ranked as the highest and best intelligence reporter in America. I want to conclude with just a moment to thank Minister Amar Gupta, who is a great Hindu leader, large temple in Washington, who is one of the strongest supporters for IAPD with Archbishop Stallings and Vice President Duggan. And he wrote, "Respected leaders, all of you, I want to say this was the most wonderful event. We are one family under God, under the direction of our true Mother of Peace. Regards, Minister Gupta, International Ambassador for Peace." God bless you all. We'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you, Professor Wong and Kathy. Thank you. Shanti, Shanti. Thank you all. We have hope that there will be a peaceful reunification very
Peace. Shalom. Salam alaikum. Peace.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I know. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wong.
Thank you in
Thank
Korea.
you, Dr.
Incredible
Wong.
presentation.
Sleep.
Thomas Wan,
Thank you.
showing our precious photos.
Thomas Wong.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you so much,
for inviting
everyone.
me so much.
Good to
Archbishop
see you.
Stallings. Thank you.
Thank you,
God bless.
everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.